The following program, What Every Parent Needs to Know About Bullying, is made possible thanks to support from Lowell General Hospital and Dragon Speech Recognition Software.
Hello, my name is Pebbles, and welcome to What Every Parent Needs to Know About Bullying.
It's been about a year since I found out that my friend killed herself because of bullying.
I once saw a kid get name called because he bumped into the popular kid.
She was bullied about her weight, her hair, how she walked.
Well, one time I was in class and my friend, he had a lisp. And I was just sitting there doing my math homework and all my friends were making fun of him.
My friend gets really good grades and a lot of people call her a nerd and a tryhard.
They didn't care. They didn't care about anyone's feelings.
Unfortunately, cyberbullying happens a lot with the kids who are at our school.
She had a birthmark on her face that she ended up getting surgically removed because of how much she was bullied.
One time a girl added a picture of herself to Facebook and other people left rude comments like, "You're ugly and a wannabe."
When I was in elementary school, I would get teased for my vision.
I once saw another kid get their pants pulled down in the bathroom.
I feel hurt. I feel scared.
Sometimes kids just take things too far.
I have a friend who was at the mall once who was being followed by a group of boys and being harassed by being called a slut.
That was my best friend. She took her life over something so evil.
Kids tend to cover up their acts of bullying by saying they were only kidding.
I guess the bully just felt like she had power over him.
People joke about it, but it's not a laughing matter at all.
My friend Jen got bullied because of her hair color.
I see people getting bullied because they're considered not good enough.
It makes me so mad. It makes me just want to go and tell those people, I hope you feel this big because of what you did to her. She took her life because of what you said, because of your actions.
During the next 30 minutes, we will be discussing the issue of bullying with some of the most respected bullying experts and advocates in New England. It is our hope that parents are tuned in and can get some valuable insight into what can be done to help your child if they are being bullied, or even if you suspect your child is a bully. According to a national survey conducted for the United States Department of Health and Human Services, bullying is seen as a big problem amongst youth ages 8 to 15 years. In fact, teens reported that bullying was a problem for them more often than racism, HIV/AIDS, or the pressure to have sex, and was as much as a problem as the pressure to use drugs and alcohol. This program has been made possible by a coalition of community organizations that have banded together to form the Stand Up campaign to combat bullying. We have so much to discuss, so let's get started. First, we have the pleasure to have the chair of the Stand Up campaign, Todd Patkin, with us. Now, Todd speaks throughout the country to high school students and their parents about the ways in which we can all work to lessen the anxiety of pressure and unhappiness that so many of our children are feeling today. I'd like to start by asking Todd, what has drawn you to the issue of bullying, and tell us a little bit about the Stand Up campaign.
Thank you, Pebbles. I got involved because I was bullied, just like so many other people. So I understand the pain. I know what kids go through. And today it's even worse with cyberbullying. We see kids that are actually killing themselves. So for me, it was really a mission that really concerned me. In terms of stand-up, it's really the brainchild of Rick Rendon and his group at the Rendon Group. And our mission is to engage, educate, and motivate kids to try to eradicate bullying in their own school. We quickly brought together a whole group of organizations, 50 in total, including educational and youth organizations, government agencies, and businesses to create programming. The #1 program that we have is our incredible rally. Last year we had over 4,000 students and their teachers come to Northeastern University. We had a ball and we really got the kids fired up, and the kids lead the event. This year we had over 5,000 students November 29th at the Songus event. What we're really trying to do is create almost like a whole army of people who will help to change the culture in the Commonwealth, so we no longer have bullying. We don't accept bullying anymore. And we see tonight in our show as our next logical program, so we can hopefully educate parents in terms of the ways that they can help their children not to be bullied and not to become bullies.
Thanks, Todd. Now let's meet the rest of our distinguished panel. Dr. Elizabeth Englander is a professor and the director of the Massachusetts Aggression Reduction Center at Bridgewater State University, where she conducts research and trainings on bullying and cyberbullying prevention. Lori Curry is a health education specialist for the Haverhill Public Schools and has taught health education to both middle and high school students for 25 years. She also serves as an advisor to a middle and high school violence prevention peer leadership program. The program was a recipient of a Stand Up 2011 award for outstanding bullying prevention. And Dr. Malcolm Smith, a University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension Youth and Family Policy Specialist who has been researching and fighting bullying for over 30 years. He has recently founded the Courage to Care Project. Thank you all for being here. Let me pose this question to Dr. Englander. What is bullying, and is the term overused?
Well, bullying is a term, unfortunately, that's overused a great deal, and it's used to refer to all kinds of things, from very minor kinds of problems to fights. But bullying is actually a very specific kind of problem between kids, and it has to do with behaviors that are really abusive, where one child who has a lot of power, usually social power, abuses that power to hurt somebody who can't defend themselves. Bullying isn't something mean that just happens once. It's something that happens over and over again. And the most common kind of bullying behaviors that we see both in the field and in the laboratory are what we call gateway behaviors, which means that they're kind of social snubs. Kids, by and large, don't bully physically anymore. The way that they do it is they do it by making other people feel very badly. And bullying is always a behavior that goes on, and that's why it's really so hurtful and so difficult to get over.
Now, is there anyone else that would like to add anything to that?
I would actually. Being in the schools, I think Dr. Englander said it very well. It's being extremely overused. That what I see as a teacher, as an educator, is that almost every time a student is being made fun of or teased, they're calling it bullying because it's gotten so much attention. That now what the schools are really battling with is trying to help parents understand the difference between our typical teasing, put downs, which are still rude and mean behaviors. However, there is a clear distinction, and I think that hopefully we'll address that later so that parents understand some of the things that don't get addressed is because it's not bullying to begin with. So it is important for parents to be educated as well as the students about what the clear definition of bullying is.
And what would you say the definition is?
Well, just like Dr. Englander said, we're looking at repeated behaviors. We're not looking, I give the example to my students, you know, if I was wearing glasses and somebody said, hey, Four Eyes, and they said it to me on a given day, I'm not going to call that bullying. If I came to school, you know, repeatedly and was hearing that from students, and those students had some type of power, whether it's physical, social power, then you're talking about a different story. So it is one of the biggest things that parents can do is be really clear about what bullying is when their kids are telling them that they're being bullied.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Lori. Now, this question I'd like to direct to Dr. Smith. Now, hasn't bullying always been a part of growing up, and what's different today?
Well, there's been some form of bullying all along, but the bullying that happens today really isn't what our parents or we experienced necessarily as kids. There's a couple of big differences. One is it's 24/7 on the internet. It never lets up. I think the second is that as children, and we've really been studying this across the nation, children are less, even though we have all these great ways of being connected, children are sometimes less connected from adults who have their back or peers who have their back. And so it's easy to get isolated, particularly when you're online. And if, you know, that's the biggest question. When you're bullied, who's got your back?
Well, I think that Dr. Smith hit a very important point, which is that it's our connection with others and our relationship with others that enable us to not be so wounded by these kinds of behaviors. So it's really the children who are the least connected who tend to be the most hurt. And sometimes overusing the term bullying actually makes them even more hurt. So it's very important to make sure that adults don't overuse the term even when they're trying to defend a child, because by doing that, they may actually make them feel much worse.
what I see is that the severity of the bullying has gotten much more intense and much worse over the years. I think about just my childhood or when I first started teaching 25 years ago, the types of things that we saw are not nearly as intense and as scary and as frightening as some of the things that are going on now. You know, we don't always have the best examples that our kids are seeing in some of the media. You know, we have all these, the Mean Girl syndrome and these shows that are showing these really intensifying, you know, behaviors that are very threatening, where we're seeing the incidences of suicides related to bullying. So I just think that in terms of the type of bullying we're seeing, it's just getting more and more severe as well.
If I could just add to that, one thing that's really important to understand is bullying happens in places where adults don't go. You know, it happens, or where there's a scarcity of adults. So the more adult involvement there is in the internet, on the bus, you know, at the bus stop, the less likely it is to happen.
She teased him. The cherries were bittersweet. Select cherries, strawberries. The sun was hot. Marlena's chocolate locks billowed. Select chocolate, crimson. They looked at each other lovingly. Scratch that. Longingly. The tension was... Hey guys! Save as Cabana Boy.
Bring your ideas to life with Dragon. Visit getdragon.com or your local retailer.
Okay, now, Lori, you are teaching in the schools every day, so let me ask you this. How should parents handle it if their child comes home and reports that he or she is being bullied?
Well, I'm glad you asked this because, in fact, as parents, your role isn't even really that much different than our role as educators. It's easy as parents to get very emotional when your child reports this to you because you're very invested in your child. But you have to understand, we are very invested in your child as well in the schools. And we want your child to feel physically and emotionally safe when they enter our buildings every day, just like you want your child to feel safe when they're at home. The one thing that I think is important is to start out by being very calm and communicating to your child in a very caring way when they approach you with the information. Then you need to validate your child's feelings. You need to just really help them understand that you're taking what they're saying to heart. Don't dismiss it as, you know, just ignore it, or it's just, you know, we all went through it. But at the same time, don't overreact either. Children don't need to be alarmed or more upset by seeing you get so upset. So by you handling it in a very calm, you know, even manner, it's going to help them feel safer to talk to you. So after they've done that, thank them. You know, it's really important to let kids know that you appreciate them going to you. I can tell you that in the classroom, too many times I hear my students say, I didn't tell my parent. I don't feel comfortable telling my parents. They're afraid at what you're going to do. They're afraid that you might overreact, that you might do something really explosive. They're not sure how that's going to have outcomes on them when they go back to school. So, you know, it's important to maintain that calmness, but also the next step is then what do you do once you've had the fact-finding conversation? And get their facts, but understand that those may not be all the facts. I can tell you as a teacher, I've had many, many students come to me over the years with stories of bullying. I've heard their side of the story, but then I go investigate and I talk to our guidance counselors, I talk to other peers, I talk to the administration. Sometimes there's a lot more to the story than what your child is telling you. So be careful on, you know, not assuming that what they're telling you is exactly the whole story. The second part of that question, I think, too, is that what do you do once you know that and you feel that you have a legitimate case of bullying that you want to report to the school? Go to the school, you know, call them up and ask for an appointment. Don't start ranting and raving over the phone and get explosive because it just puts the school on the defensive. If you communicate your issues, your concerns in a calm, respectful manner, I think you'll find that the school will be much more open to helping you. You can ask for an appointment to go in. I know in our schools, as I'm sure many schools, you know, resources are very limited. We don't have all the resources in the schools that we need to deal with the emotional issues that are in schools today. Our guidance counselors are overwhelmed, our administrators are overwhelmed, and they're doing a really good job, but you do have the right to go and meet with them and express your concern. And it's important to understand that schools are there to help you find a solution.
Now let me ask a follow-up question. How can parents work with schools more effectively to address the problem of bullying?
I, you know, encourage all parents to be as involved with your school as you can. whether that's going in, volunteering, whether it's going to events, just to get a feeling of the school culture. Number two, I think that one thing that parents really can do is advocate for programs within your schools that address these issues. I know as a health education teacher, we don't always have, you know, the amount of programs in place that really can address this, and it's a very critical issue. So if parents just really use their voices, you know, we need programs that address, as I'm sure I was talking to Dr. Smith earlier, we need programs that address social skills, where kids are learning empathy, where kids are learning assertiveness, where kids are learning refusal skills. So parents advocating for those programs, getting involved in their schools, and being good role models. You can't underestimate how important it is that every day your actions and your words are teaching your children something. You can talk till you're blue in the face, say everything you want, but it means nothing if they see you act differently as an adult when you're in your scenarios and situations in the real world.
If there's a problem at school, if there's a problem with your child and other kids at the school, try to get very detailed information about it. You're the best person to talk with your child and get that kind of information. And once you have it, share it with the school. Don't assume that they know everything. We've worked on so many cases where the school was missing a key point of information that kept them from really successfully resolving something. So keep the lines of communication open. Don't overreact and assume everything is bullying. Just focus on what the problem is and try to think about that and talk about it with your child and communicate it to the school, even if you're just letting them know what's going on. I think that's very helpful.
And I want to add to that, if it happens on, say, Facebook or social media somewhere, that it's really important to try to make a copy of that.
Document
it. And document it and bring it to the school with you, because the school needs that information to adequately respond.
Now, Dr. Smith, this question is for you. How might I know if my child is bullying or being cruel to someone else? That's the one thing, you know, a lot of parents don't want to talk about. And what should I do if I find out that he or she is being cruel?
Well, I think the better way to ask the question, and the way I ask it as a parent, is does my child show empathy and concern and compassion for other people? See, we've come to understand bullying as behavior as really a social and emotional learning deficit. So what I'm saying is it's just like having a deficit in math or having a deficit in science. In order to get along in the world, in order to do the great things that we want our children to do, they have to know how to get along with other people. So, you know, the best way to measure how is my child doing in that is to watch them, to ask them, does your child bring home stories of helping someone out? Do you help involve your child in showing compassion? You know, it can be little things. With the holiday season coming up, it's a wonderful time to show compassion for others and to involve your child in that process, so that, you know, we continually reinforce that we're civil to one another, that we have manners, you know. And you know, I think one of the myths that we've bought as parents sometimes is that we can do all of this in quality time, but it's really all the time.
You know, it's so important. I know most schools have an anonymous box that students can put a note in. And when I go, you see some students that are so strong, and parents need to encourage their children to put a note in an anonymous box, because most bullying behavior happens in places, as you said, where adults aren't. So these strong, you know, football player or the cheerleader, the student who isn't having any troubles, if they see someone continually picked on, and they feel like it's getting to the point where the student, you know, might do something destructive, we as parents want to encourage our kids, please drop a note. You don't have to put your name on it.
I also want to encourage parents not to worry too much about dabbling in these kinds of behaviors. Bullying in schools can be seen as a very high status behavior, so it's not unusual for children to try it out and to see if they can get a little bit of a social lift from it. So if you think that something might be going on, or maybe you read something that your child has written online that you find upsetting or potentially abusive, it's important not to overreact. Many kids try out mean behaviors while they're growing up. And that's not, it doesn't mean they're bad, it doesn't mean they're maladjusted, but what they're looking for when they do that is your response. So if your response is to just deny that they could possibly be doing it, that's not going to be helpful. On the other hand, if your response is really to sit down and say, this is really upsetting to me, so let's talk about what's going on and why you did this, and I really want to hear your side, then they might learn something from it and understand your perspective on it and why it really matters.
Now let me ask one more question before we go to our studio audience of parents for a quick question or two. Elizabeth, this is for you. Now, what can parents do to help their child avoid becoming cyberbullies or victims of cyberbullying?
Well, I think that traditionally as parents, we've really emphasized controlling what kids do online, so knowing what they're up to, knowing what websites they go to, and that to some extent is still important, but I think the reality today is that children have so many places where they can get online and so many devices that they can use to get online. The idea that you would be able to monitor every single thing they do in a digital environment is just not going to happen. So really the emphasis and the only thing that's left to us as parents is to talk about this, for children to be educated and be aware about it, and to get materials that will help you talk with your child just about what they do online. Ask them what games they play. Ask them to show you what they like to do. And talk to them about how people interact on these sites and what they think about it and what they hear about and what they see. And start when they're very young. In our research, over 90% of 8-year-olds are interacting live online with other children. So this isn't an issue that can wait until they're in middle school. This is a discussion that has to begin and keep going while they're in kindergarten, in first grade, when they're beginning to do things like play games. The other thing that I think is really useful to understand is what the risks are. For example, there are some risks that are well known, such as using websites far too young before you're supposed to be on them. But other risks we're just beginning to discover now in research. Just this year, we found out, for example, that owning a smartphone at a very young age is actually a risk factor, a significant risk factor for children either becoming a cyberbully or becoming a victim online. So I'm not telling parents that they shouldn't buy their children smartphones, but if you're buying a 7 or 8 or 9-year-old a smartphone, you need to understand what the risks are as well as what the benefits are so that you can really make an informed decision. And at least you can talk to your children about those kinds of risks.
I'd also like to say that, if you teach your child how to have empathy and compassion for other people, they will practice it online. And so, it goes back to basics. But the other thing, and I think Elizabeth made a really good point, that, I don't trust my 24-year-old alone with a chainsaw. Why would I trust a 7-year-old alone with a very dangerous instrument? And, there's sort of a myth that this somehow makes your kids safer. And I'm not sure that's necessarily true.
I think it's important to understand that this issue is never going to go away. Right. The train has left the station and it's not coming back. Right. So we really, denying kids access to digital technology is not the answer. The answer is to emphasize other healthy things in life, to think about it like a mental hygiene issue. So you don't want to do too much of anything. You don't want to over-exercise, you don't want to overeat. And kids, when they're young particularly, are very receptive to messages about wellness and about health. So really think about it from that point of view and talk to them, how do we use this device in a way that's normal and healthy and smart?
Kids who are empathetic to others tend to do better in school, tend to do better in life.
Thank you to our panel. You were all terrific. Now, we do have a few minutes left before we wrap up, so let's take some questions from the parents that we have with us here today. Now, before you ask your question, please share with us your name and how many children you have going to school.
Good evening. My name is Jacqueline Marmel, and I have an 8-year-old. who's right here with me. I have a question for tonight. My question is, I would like to know if a learning disabled student is at a higher risk of being victimized.
Yes, the short answer is. We find that certain students with a mental illness, students with learning disabilities, students who are obese, almost 30 or 40 factors can put you at risk for bullying. And I think, what we have to do with our students that we know have disabilities, know have problems, is create a safe base at home. That your child, if they have a learning disability, feels totally comfortable at the end of the day when they get home to their safe haven to share with you what's been going on at school. And in that way, you can be a better advocate for your child. But unfortunately, yes, bullies tend to pick on children who have noticeable differences, and learning disabilities can be one of those.
Hi, my name is Carmen. I have 2 daughters in public schools. I would like to find out, what is the procedure that a parent can take if your child is being cyberbullied?
Well, there's a couple of things that you can do when your child is being cyberbullied. The first thing that you can do is be sure to keep a copy of what's going on, even if it's upsetting. You certainly don't have to post it on the fridge, but print it out and put it in a drawer somewhere just in case. The second thing you need to do is you need to report what's going on to the website. Okay, and there's many ways that you can report to websites, but most websites have a link that you can click on to report problems to them. The third thing that you need to do is you need to make sure that this isn't going beyond the internet. Actually, more than half of the time in our research, when problems happened online, they were also happening at school. So it's usually a good idea to let the school know what's going on, just in case something's going on. They can be your eyes and ears while your child's at school. But I think that one of the realities of online life is that sometimes mean things are going to happen and you're not going to be able to control it. So probably the most important thing to do is prevention. And the most effective prevention that we find is to talk to kids about what they see and what they hear about and what they think about it. And the reason for that is that kids who tell us that they've discussed cyber issues with their parents or with school aren't as disturbed when it happens to them. It's the kids who never talk about it beforehand who are absolutely snowed by it.
I want to thank our awesome panel, Todd Patkin, Dr. Elizabeth Englander, Lori Curry, and Dr. Malcolm Smith. And also our terrific studio audience of concerned parents. You guys were great. Give yourselves a big round of applause. And also, special thanks to the Stand Up campaign for making this program possible. It has been a pleasure for me to host this very important program.
To view an expanded version of this program, please log on to standup.org. What Every Parent Needs to Know About Bullying was made possible thanks to support from Lowell General Hospital and Dragon Speech Recognition Software.